Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang with Morsels of a Thought number 1878. I am here every day and I am trying to bring us morsels of a thought. Morsels of a thought of wisdom, hopefully, that we learn the right things to do and we do them. Because when we do the right things, we are creating acts of virtue. And this world needs a lot of virtue. And we're short on it, I think. We have been short on it for the last 500 years, I think, at least. So let's start reading again. All right, we are in chapter 15, the China Years of Larry J. Namer, off script. Recipes for success. He has real recipes in here. And oh, let me show you his face. I think I've shown it to you before, but this is his face. This is his face. This is Larry J. Namer. He's a very nice man. I think he may have recovered from that situation where they had fires in Los Angeles and he was one of the people that had to evacuate. Oh my God. Yeah, something like that. So that's pretty traumatic. It probably, oh God, dang. Anyway, so we are going to read from the place we left off. I'll read the last paragraph we read. Well, I never grew accustomed to pig's ear salad. One custom I caught on to rather quickly was their way of conducting business. Okay, I'll go over to the method that they used. It went down. When we made a toast, they would have one drink, but individually they would toast us, and we found ourselves having five for their one. I think the funniest time was when my Russian friend and Metan global entertainment investor Oganes, Oganes, was at the meeting with me and, of course, joined us for dinner. Before we headed down to the restaurant, I explained that I had a very bad allergy to alcohol, and the doctor said if my lips even touch liquor, I could die. But I went on to tell them that my friend Oganis is from Russia and he has been drinking since birth. He would be happy to drink all night with you. What I found amazing was that even at 5 to 1, Oganis outdrank them. I guess there is a lot to be said for starting young. We had a lot of successes in China, and through our connections, we were able to bring them more than television shows. For one thing, we brought the Harlem Globetrotters to China for several exhibitions in Macau. One of the most successful things we did, though, was bring the Leonardo da Vinci exhibition to China. This was an exhibition created in Milan, and it did very well in China. That led us to believe that immersive exhibitions like Van Gogh or 100 Years of Disney Animation would do very well. So we refocused our efforts a bit to negotiate territory licenses for those and cut back on producing original content, but still do that. While COVID put a crimp in on our China activities, we managed to survive by shifting our focus from production, which is impossible to do during lockdowns and quarantines, to other things like creating a company that would source goods from Chinese factories on behalf of Western companies who typically had to go through brokers and pay huge markups. Since we had good people who spoke English at a Beijing office and a strong knowledge of the Chinese manufacturing scene, we used this detour to generate enough revenue to keep us alive during the very difficult time. The pandemic was challenging for everyone, and I wasn't an exception. In 2020, when COVID was making its appearance, I started developing again in the States, this time under the banner of LJN Media Group. Uh-huh. Chapter 16, My Microsoft Days. Nurses. One day, we got a call from someone at Microsoft who said they wanted to meet me to discuss a new technology related to media and entertainment that Bill Gates was solidly behind. He explained that he got our information from Rick Porton, Portin, who was the head of production at but was now back living in the Seattle area and working as a consultant to Microsoft on production issues. They needed someone who understood the media world at a high level, someone they could trust to tell them what was best for Microsoft, someone who didn't have any other agenda. Excuse me. Rupert Murdoch was telling them to follow him into the future. John Malone from TCI was doing the same, and then, of course, so was Time Warner. Hearing what they had to say, we signed on at first to provide advice and guidance on navigating the media world, as well as working with a part of the Windows team who needed to understand how TV people might use interactivity. This all fell under a group called My TV, M small I, capital T, capital V, capital M, small I, capital T, capital V, which reported to a longtime Microsoft person named Paul Mitchell. Gosh, I've even heard of that guy. Of course, that's just a common name. While people were, it's a shampoo too. While people were quick to criticize Microsoft for all sorts of things, we had nothing but good experiences. Well, almost nothing, but we will get to that later. For me, this was a really great opportunity. I consider myself a creative, but my college degree was economics. For that reason alone, I was an oddity in Hollywood. Being a creative who understood a balance sheet was not common back then. Now I was explaining my knowledge, getting lessons in technology, and the development of the things that drive the future of all industries. So I guess you could say I was becoming a triple threat. I found that Microsoft had an amazing way of identifying and recruiting the smartest kids on the planet. They lived and breathed their jobs, and it was common to find some of them sleeping on the floor in the morning after spending the previous night problem solving. We played with the idea of what was called enhanced TV. Now, keep in mind that this was in the days before digital TV and when dial up internet was the primary way to get online. The premise was fairly simple. What if you could overlay a web browser on top of a TV picture and use that as a way of adding more information? As we went deeper into the creative uses of this concept, it became clear that we could do quite a lot. What if you could overlay several browsers with the number increasing every time someone watched the same TV show? You could change the overall experience and give people new reasons to come back. For example, I'm a Seinfeld fan and have seen every episode several times, so I don't have a lot of reasons to watch anything but my favorite episodes. But what if the system knew I was watching again and the browser contained anecdotes from Jerry himself about what went on the day they filmed that episode, or it contained jokes that didn't make it into the final edit? As a fan of the show, I would watch every episode again, then maybe the next time I would get anecdotes from Elaine, then George, and then Kramer. I would watch it over and over because the experience would be different. It would be new. Since TV reruns are the big profit centers for the show creators, networks, etc., this not only enhanced the fan experience, but also enhanced the monetary value of the show itself. As we contemplated the possibilities, we got to really stretch our minds as to what could be done. It went beyond entertainment. There were implications for education, health, and wellness, and many other things. For example, as a writer, I might write something targeted for adults, but what if the show was watched by a teen who didn't know the vocabulary I was using or the references I was making? Someone who fit the profile I created for this Wait, someone who fit the profile I created this for didn't need anything more from me, but what if there was a small button on the side of the screen that let the viewer know there was more to be had if they clicked on it? If they clicked it. It could be an explanation or of a reference or just a definition of a term. Whatever it was, this technology could broaden the accessibility and enjoyability of the show. Knowing that, a team was assigned to build TV functionality into the operating system. Most people would never know it was there, but we could get a base of users to start interacting with the enhancements we would provide. To broaden, to broaden the test audience, Microsoft looked into buying a company called Web TV, capital W, capital E, capital B, capital T, capital V, which built standalone boxes that attached to your cable and a telephone line and enabled the same content enhancements. We wanted to work with the creators and writers of the series, so the idea of the enhancements would be baked into the show itself. However, convincing TV networks was not an easy thing, as they were all fearful of Microsoft. Even so, we did find some brave souls and did some very interesting stuff. First up was enhancing Baywatch, no pun intended, which was geared to a relatively younger audience. But I thought it wasn't going to be difficult to know what can be done for the younger folks. So I wondered what we could do to attract an older and less tech savvy user. After trying to convince many show owners and talents, we hit upon a very unlikely show. Judge Judy was very frank and said that while she didn't necessarily understand everything we were talking about, she knew the future of TV was changing and she wanted to stay on top of everything new. In the end, we worked closely with a guy named David Feinlieb, Feinlieb, who was amazing. It's almost a palindrome, who was amazing and turned our creative ideas into functional features. And we did over 200 enhanced episodes of the show, using it as a way for viewers to purchase her new book just by clicking a link. The biggest surprise, this is off script by Larry J. Namer, Recipes for Success. And this was a way to provide shared experiences. Okay, the biggest surprise was how older folks were using the chat function more than anything else. This was a way to provide shared experiences with their friends and relatives and a way to combat loneliness. I used my mom as a guinea pig so I could get constant feedback. She loved the chat and would use it to connect to her friends all over the country as they watched the show together. I realized that this was no different than me watching a New York Giants football game and calling my friends to discuss how bad the coaching or players were, with one difference. This was easier. The next big thing we tried to do was called Simulchat, Simulchat, where we created a studio. Oh, sorry. Where we created an in studio that would watch certain shows at certain times and comment about the show. There was a show called Mystery Science Theater 2000, which ran bad Japanese sci-fi movie and had little cartoon figureheads in theater seats talking over the movie. If you ask me, the chatter of these little figures was more interesting than the film itself. Wanting to create the real-life version of that, we found Tim Conway Jr. and some of his friends to be the group that people could join and watch the shows with. It even got to the point where they would be watching a show and then decide it was boring and instruct the audience to turn to a different channel. That must have drove the Nielsen audience measurement crazy. Without a doubt, we were onto something and it was working. However, it all came to a screeching halt when the Microsoft guy in charge got very defensive, believing that we were showing him up. He made up some story about us misusing MSIP and called the Microsoft police to escort us out of the studio building. Despite that, we still continued to work with the other parts of Microsoft. And as a bonus, we understood this less than genius person got fired not long after. While I was brought in as a consultant because I had no other corporate agenda or bias, I ended my 2-year relationship as Microsoft's primary consultant to interactive TV strategy, capital I for interactive, because I didn't want to be beholden to their agenda. We went on from there to serve in a similar capacity to one of Paul Allen's companies called Digio, Digeo. Many of the creative concepts we developed in both places are in play today as the technology that allows us to do so many of the things we can do today that we never even thought about before. When the US moved to digital TV and the internet got fast enough to support high quality video, with so many new things became possible. And I have to give credit where credit is due. A great deal of what we developed was in conjunction with Rick Porton. We were good at coming up with the creative ideas, but Rick knew how to harness the right technology and implement them. He was instrumental in taking us from idea to application and bringing our new technologies to the public. We are reading from Off Script. Can you see the word? Off Script. It's actually two words. And it's Recipes for Success. That's the title. And then Never Follow the Crowd is a piece of advice right on the cover. Chapter 17. No, I'm not gay, but many of my friends are. I am not gay, not that there is anything wrong with that, but some of my dearest and closest friends are. And as associations often do, because I hang out with them, there are some who assume that I am gay too. A few years ago, I was contacted by a creative branding guy in the fashion industry by the name of Darren Mayer, Mayer, who asked me to work with him on an original TV concept taking esports stars, capital, the whole word is capitalized, esports stars, and mixing them with famous celebrities and then having them compete on a TV series. To put it into context, it was a bit like the old ABC show Battle of the Network Stars. We worked on that development and I had high hopes for it, but it seems Darren, who now was going by the name Mr. D, already had another big idea. He wanted to build a social media site that was a communications and connection vehicle for the LBGQI community. It was called BTYKWEEN, pronounced Beauty Queen. Oh, LGBTQ. And was indeed potentially even bigger than the idea he proposed to me, and I became an advisor. He brought an iconic fashion designer, Richie Rich, to help connect them to a legion of folks from that community to be brand ambassadors and content creators. When the press got wind of this, they published a picture of Mr. D, Richie Rich, and me. Now, Mr. D, ay, 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 page. Mr. D wasn't quite sure which side of the fence he was playing on, but he dressed in his unique style, which led most people to assume that he was part of that community. To his credit, Richie was an inspiration to many young folks who still credit him with giving them the courage to come out. So when people saw the photos of me with them, it stirred speculation, and I got loads of emails and social media comments saying, "Oh, it's about time you came out. You like fashion, cooking, and show tunes, so we always thought you were, but now we know." Rather than trying to clarify, I'm about as hetero as they come, I just went with it and even let Rich and D influence my way of dressing. I started to pay attention to what I wore and upgraded my look. I even wear Crocs as my daily footwear. Now, there isn't anything wrong with being gay, but I found that there were some drawbacks. The only time I was ever told I couldn't go into a restaurant in LA, which was when we were all going to Maestro's, Mastro, Maestro's in Beverly Hills, and the security guy at the door wouldn't let us in because of what Dee was wearing. I think it was women's Prada pants and sandals. No big deal. We went to the Palm instead. They let us in. Now, while this project was moving along nicely, everyone thought it was a genius idea. Mr. D met a girl. I guess he decided which team he was going to play on because he distanced himself from the Beauty Queen team and was particularly nasty to Richie Rich. He was new at management and tried to get Richie to do morning reports and memos. When I learned this, I tried to explain that Richie is a pure creative and not a corporate soldier, but that didn't sink in. I even offered to manage the creative folks until the company could hire someone to assume that role, but that was also ignored, and the situation just kept getting worse. Rather than let me manage Richie and Kevin Aviance, Aviance, a 7 foot tall androgynous drag persona who was and is still a very popular DJ in New York City, D distanced not only distanced himself from me and Kevin, but he also fired Richie. That was it for me. It was simply too much drama, and I wasn't going to compete with the girlfriend when it came to guiding D. Soon after, we heard that the girlfriend was made an executive of the company as and was listed as being a founder. As far as we knew, though, she was a real estate person in Beverly Hills and had no experience with anything that could justify any of these moves. We all predicted that the romance would come to a screeching halt at some point, and we were right in that assumption. She dumped him, which was sad because by doing so, he lost his girlfriend, his company, and more important, his friends. On a side note, it was right after this that Richie changed his moniker to Mr. C. Thankfully, Richie recovered quickly. Actually, it was a blessing in disguise because it enabled him to get back to his roots as a fashion designer. His previous brand was called Heatherette, just like it sounds, and was worn by folks like Madonna, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Paris Hilton, Pam Anderson, and many more. Richie even reached national recognition for designing the famous Carrie t-shirt that was worn on Sex and the City. Kudos to Patricia Fields for recognizing Richie's talents early on. Richie's brand was a success, and he sold it to Damon John, Damon John of Shark Tank fame. Just about a year ago, Richie decided to jump back in with a new brand, which he named Richarette. Richerette. That brand is in its early stages. Richerette. 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 That brand is in its early stages, and 2025 is slated to be its breakout year. While he is readying runway shows for while he is readying runway shows for New York and LA Fashion Weeks in the fall, I am an advisor to him and Kikero Oka, Cicero Oka, OCA, the person who really keeps Richie organized and on schedule, and I have an equity stake in the company. What is a Richie Rich fashion show like? I describe it as a circus on steroids. It is so unconventional and just as much fun. Oh my God, hold on. I'm sorry. And just as much fun. He doesn't use the standard models, but instead insists on using everyday people of all colors, shapes, and sizes. For example, his last show featured an elderly woman in a wheelchair, a skateboarder smoking a cigarette, skinny guys in thongs, and the list goes on. My son John, even Joe, and my son John even walked in his runway shows. Next, my new grandson Bowden will unveil a new part of the line called Baby Richarette. At the tender age of 1 year, he's landed his first modeling gig, nepotism at its finest. Okay, so we are going to read about how the connection between him and Richie is odd since he was a New York City nightlife fixture and part of what was called the Club Kids, who controlled the entrance to most of the hot clubs in LA. Okay, so we'll do that next time. I'll talk to you later. Old Kinderhook.